All right, thank you for staying with Daybreak. We're having the conversation on how to grow your SME, and we'd like to hear from you as well. The question we're asking you is, what are the practical ways one can grow their SME? That is the question. 22422 is the SMS line. Just text us your name and where you're texting from. At Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya, use the hashtag Daybreak. If you'd like to call in live, let's make that engagement live as well. You can call in on 0742 961 339. Just tell us your experience on the ground and what you think, if you've managed to grow an SME or if it has failed, and the lessons you will learn from it. That's what we're trying to do, ensure everybody, we grow each other in this sector, right? Brilliant. Let's see what you're saying online. Let's bring them up and see what your feedback is so far. Ole Shonko says, I think SMEs also need to move out of investing in the traditional businesses and start thinking of techpreneurship and social entrepreneurship. All right. Maureen says, stay focused. Don't try to do many things. Keep tabs on competition and use social media in networking. All right. That is an interesting subject. We'll talk about whether you should invest in different things or stay with one, like you say. Abel from Eldoret says the way to grow an SME is to diversify. Say a kinyozi should double up as an M-Pesa shop. The other way is to plow back all the earnings and avoid premature celebrations. All right. Kinyanjui from Kikuyu Town says, to grow the SME fast, stop choking startups with so many unnecessary licenses. The government should give tax breaks. We'll talk about tax breaks as well. And Mtembei from Meru says the best way to grow an SME is 1, have product required in your area of business. 2, avoid overborrowing. 3, don't mix business and friends. 4, comply with the relevant authority to avoid shutdown. And 5, intensify good marketing and the customer's good relationship. And 6, avoid overspending. All right. Brilliant. A lot of solutions coming through there. We'll talk about some of them, like whether you should diversify or focus on one thing. Now, joining us now is Victor Otieno, CEO, Vifa Consult. Thanks for making time, Victor. So now the question we were dealing with before you came in was, what are the issues facing the SME industry? Because I know you've done a lot of research around that line. Yeah. So thank you very much for having me. I think the biggest challenge that keeps on popping up is the issue around access to finance. Yeah. And I think Kenya is a unique country in the sense that when we talk about access to finance, we only talk about banks. We don't consider that there are other players who if facilitated, can be able to provide the necessary capital or finance to SMEs. And I think that's a conversation that we need to start having. Yeah, so like we were talking about having a guarantee fund of sorts. And if you're talking about a guarantee fund, the first point of call we always look at is banks. Yet we have a vibrant angel network in Kenya. We have VCs, we have PEs who would want to play in the space. The only thing is they are not being de-risked to really focus on SMEs. Yeah, all right. And Mwinamo, there's so many issues coming through from our people, the viewers, saying that invest in many things. So one of them says diversify. Yes, the other one says focus on one. Which one is the best?
Yes. I was actually having this argument just 2 days ago with a certain group, and from my experience, because I've consulted with a lot of entrepreneurs, I don't know where the diversification thing came from. I think it was during the Moi era where people felt that if I did not have property, my business could go down anytime or it could be taken away, or something just crept into our culture. But when you look at businesses that succeed over the long term, people tend to diversify later after they've focused on one thing, grown it, made money from it, had experience building a business, then take that money and start to put it in other sectors. And I mean, businesses are like children. When you have too many, you have to give all of them attention. And you find that if you have too many businesses running at the same time, it may be a challenge just to be able to build deep expertise in each of these different areas. It may be difficult to remain competitive over the long term running several things at the same time. So you'd find that many people who tend to run several things at the same time get stuck on commoditized types of businesses. And one of the things that I always ask these entrepreneurs when I meet them is, are you sure that you're profitable? Because you'll find that I'm running a taxi business, I'm running a hardware shop, but I'll take money from the taxi business to go and buy some stock for the hardware shop, and then when the hardware shop makes some profit, I take some money, go back to repay the loan for the taxi car, So when you look at it overall, you find that this person is probably, I call them money transfer agents. You're just taking money from one business, putting in another, taking and giving back. But when you look at the global picture, you might not necessarily find that they're being profitable. Look at all the people who build businesses that become great. You find that they focus on one area, then when it multiplies, then they take that money and start investing in other sectors.
Right.
So I always go for focus.
So let's have this debate from the economists and all of us now. Diversify or specialize?
Well, I think you should diversify where you put your money. I think when you're doing business, you should focus on key, not more than, I don't think more than two, right? More in the related sectors. Focus.
In related sectors.
Yes, I don't think you should be holding businesses. Property, then a telecom business, and then, you know, Quailegs or whatever, since that's the order of the day. I think you should really focus in one area, and I agree if you have additional financing, and once you have a very clear, very stable business, you can diversify into something else if you have additional capital. But where you put your money, your profits, maybe you should diversify that. You can invest in, put them in, you know, interest earning account, and there are very many different options in Kenya. You can put it in different things. So I think you diversify where you put your money, but you focus in business.
So that's maybe for the mid-level income people, but for the mamamboga?
For the mamamboga, I think when you think of diversifying for the mamamboga, focus in one area, but maybe diversify where you provide your wares. You know, if you have, I know some people who, you know, there's a lady who is selling mahindi choma in one area, then she hired Hassan and maybe a few other people to sell that mahindi choma on different highway locations. So maybe you can diversify where you provide your product, but focus on one key product.
And this is what you think? This is an argument that we can have all day, but diversify or specialize.
The biggest challenge with going deep in one sector is that you start running into competition and market share issues. And this is both a small business and a corporate issue. So when I talk to small businesses, the biggest problem that they have when it comes to hyper-specialization and really creating niche is you run into competition, you run into market share issues, and then you start running into big players who often have a larger skill set and a large amount of money. So it is true that you should ideally focus, but when you start dealing with the realities of what that means in terms of really creating a sustainable path for growth for your individual business, you start running into those problems. When you look at the larger businesses, and this does have an impact on the small businesses, the biggest problem that they're having is that they're saying, if we are to focus in one specific area, you know, for 25 years, and that's all I do in terms of my business, how much aggregate demand does Kenya really have to continue buying products in that specific business area? So when you're looking at it from a macroeconomic perspective, you have somebody who's like, okay, well, I'll start doing bar soap, and they'll do it at an industrial capacity, but you'll find they'll start selling cooking oil, they'll start selling detergent. Why are they doing that? Because there are questions as to whether we do have the aggregate demand to really have a deep, really deep specialization in sort of product specification. So I think whether you're dealing with a small business or you're dealing with a large business, they are micro economic issues that they're dealing with, and then there are macroeconomic issues that I think prevent the specialization they're alluding to that you can get in markets that perhaps, you know, have deeper pockets.
Victor, what is your position?
What I think the reality of Kenyan SMEs is we are basically retailers. The majority of us who are in SMEs, we buy to sell. The reason, for example, Nyamakima is suffering is because for the longest time they've been buying electronics from China at a low price and selling it at a higher price. You look at Kikomba, is the same thing. Now we have Kenya going through the ease of doing business, and it means that maybe a Chinese national can come invest, and they are more capitalized than your local retailer. So you'll see a lot of SMEs suffering because ideally they don't have a business, they are basically retailing. And I think we need to move our people to a position where they start creating value and solving problems. So we are looking at manufacturing. Up to now, we still don't support Kariobangi light industry as it should be. We say that Kariobangi has fake stuff, but what are we doing to really help them improve? Because even if you look at China 20 years ago, they were producing the same stuff, those fake stuff, quote unquote. So if you can be able to support the people in these clusters, if you're looking at Karioko where they're doing leather, we're looking at Uhuru or Jericho Market where they're doing apparels, and Kariobangi who are doing fabrication. If we can be able to start supporting guys in manufacturing and promoting or even incentivizing guys to do agriculture, for instance, then probably we can see the kind of the value that in terms of salary that an SME would get would be something significant that can feed more and more people. Yeah. So I think moving away from the issue of just buying to sell to solving problems.
Okay. Let's talk about access to markets, Mwiki. And now, how can we tilt that balance in favor of Kenya, because we are a net importer? How then do we ensure that our people can also export?
We are getting into agreements with the countries around us. We have the East African community. Yeah. We've been in talks in terms of making sure that we have free flow of labor, free flow of trade. There have been some hiccups with that, with some protectionism happening at the border. There have been a lot of problems in terms of people being able to cross that border without having a lot of red tape in trying to cross into the different economies. So there are structures, for example, with the East African community. And also with the African Union at large, there's been a push to kind of open up Africa to Africans, making sure African countries can trade with each other. And if we're able to get this right and have free flow of labor, free flow of goods, and ability to trade in larger markets, that would be able to provide larger foundations or larger markets for different goods. As it stands now, even if you think about some of the reasons behind why the SGR in itself is happening, there are no strong inroads or connectors between African countries. You're unable to fly from here to Morocco direct. You're unable to fly from here to, for example, Ouagadougou. I'm not sure if KQ still has that option. It's the ability to contact or reach or access these different countries because of the infrastructure, the dearth in infrastructure, I think has been a real struggle for us. So I think once we get those fundamentals right, in Kenya we have this idea of the big four, and one of those big four is building infrastructure. If we're able to get that right, and if we do that in conjunction with many other economies, we should be able to see some changes. That's not a short-term thing. It's going to be a very long-term thing, but I think if we start now, we should be able to have inroads.
Okay, let's bring in Vincent. Vincent is calling us from right here in Nairobi. Vincent, good morning. Vincent, good morning. Vincent. Go ahead with your comment or question, Vincent.
Yes, you find that the challenges young entrepreneurs face.
Yes.
According to the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, you find that 46% of new startups collapse within the first year of inception.
Yes.
So when you address the challenges that are affecting new startups, one of them is low knowledge skills on entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
The other one is limited access to entrepreneurship. And the other one is lack of ready market and also, of course, investor linkage.
Yeah.
So the challenge you need to address, especially in Kenya, you find the young people are very innovative and creative.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is, of course, to incubate these business and ideas and accelerate them through ensuring that they know how to design a business, looking at the business model canvas, looking at the issues to do with compliance, because currently young people are running businesses, but if you ask them, do you have even a business? They don't have a business. Do they have a KRA PIN? They don't have a KRA. Do they have a business permit? They don't have. So we need to train them on how to make their businesses compliant.
Yeah. And
then the other aspect is training them on how they can be able to market their produce, even branding. Currently, if you ask a business person in Kenya, do they even have a receipt book? They don't have. Do they have a delivery note? Do they have an invoice? So you find there are a lot of young people doing businesses, but they cannot even be able to supply even to a school which have opportunities of you can provide cereals, supply cereals, you can provide sanitary bins, but there are ways on how you can be able to make your business compliant so that you can be relevant within the job market.
Okay.
So I believe the challenge we are facing is we need to enhance more training, especially when you're looking at the Women Enterprise Fund.
Yeah.
When you're looking to the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, the Weather Fund, the Youth Fund.
Yeah.
Money is there. We have Tala. We have money is all over.
Okay.
Young person gets money, don't have proper knowledge on how to run a business, and eventually they collapse. Only 54% of these new startups succeed in a year. So we need to look at rethink on what the challenges affecting the young.
All right. Thanks, Vincent. That's Vincent calling us live from Nairobi here. Victor, what do you think from those remarks?
I think one, and I've always advocated for this, is an SME does not have any incentive to formalize. Actually, it's in their interest to be informal because the level of compliance and the cost of compliance is quite high. And I think if you were to have a structured financing marketplace for SMEs, and I'll give you an example. If you go to a bank, for instance, instead of them asking for collateral, you should have other criteria other than collateral. For instance, having books of accounts, having some corporate governance issues addressed. It gives you points to getting some level of credit. So there's an incentive for me to start formalizing and complying. So with no incentives, I doubt if anyone would want to formalize.
I mean, I completely agree, and I think there are internal and external factors. I think, first of all, this idea that young people all need to be entrepreneurs because this economy is not creating jobs is nonsense. And I think what happens is that people who don't want to be businessmen and who are not good businessmen or good businesswomen end up having to run a business, and then you wonder why, businesses are dying. So I think the first big problem is that when you have a situation where people cannot just go to school and get a job, the way sort of, this economy is meant to be designed, you end up people doing business when they have absolutely no interest or desire. As a result, when you have the reality of running a business, it is a very stressful. I think anybody who's ever run a business and a small business, it's a very stressful, a very high intensity, and a very intense process. And if you are, as an individual, had no real interest in it and you're doing it because you need to survive, then your resilience in maintaining that is obviously going to wane as time goes over. I think when it comes to some of the other issues that are raised, I think there are internal factors like bookkeeping and all these other things, that we could be running our businesses better. But the reality is that if we don't deal with the high cost of doing business, if we don't have real consistent stories that show young people that it's worth sticking it because you can scale, then why would people really want to invest an immense amount of time and money running a business if it's not really going to scale or really generate the sort of profits that happens once or twice? So I think while we do have to deal with the internal factors, I think there are also external realities. It's
an interesting conversation that you're starting there, because we were talking about access to markets earlier on. Do you see a disconnect, a policy disconnect versus reality? For example, it's easier now to bring in eggs from Uganda or milk from Uganda, for example. Now the government is thinking of slapping a 16% tax on it, but they haven't addressed the cost of production locally.
No, and I think the whole market issues is a bit of an animal. I think, first of all, the reality for a lot of SMEs and small businesses is that they don't necessarily have the money to get accurate information on the market. So when you're looking at access to markets, the biggest problem is the information asymmetry. Even if you look at places like Kariakor and Uhuru, beyond what they already know, it is very difficult to get a sense of where else could I really sell these products at a mass level. So if we're not generating good market intelligence that can then allow SMEs to decide how to spend their money and where they're going to push their products, it just sort of becomes what's in the wind, where can I get information? So part of the market access issue has to do with the information issue. And if we don't get good market intelligence, what are we really asking SMEs to do to figure it out how? They're running a business, I think the other thing around the regional markets is the non-tariff barriers. We can sit here and talk about, free movement of goods and people. Ask any business person trying to get their goods across the border. It's the non-tariff barriers that kill them. And what's happening with some businesses, particularly those SMEs that are reaching a stage where they can scale, it reaches a stage for some of them where it's just easier to start a business in Uganda or Tanzania than to deal with all these non-tariff issues of trying to get your goods across the border. So then that also has implications on a Kenyan business really being able to scale at a regional level. So when you're talking about market to access, you're really talking about different factors. One has to do with the micro issues that the firm is facing, but then some of it is the macro issue where if it's easier for me to just open up a shop in Tanzania and capture that market, I'm going to do that. I'm not going to deal with these non-tariff issues, till daybreak.
Okay.
Remember last year, government announced that they were opening warehouses in East Africa, so in Burundi, Congo, and that was just an announcement. So my question was is it a knee-jerk reaction to bypass non-tariff barriers? Because it was just an announcement, and up to now, any operationalization around the same has not taken place. Yeah. Two is the heads of state meeting, I think, which was to happen last quarter, I think around November, December, didn't happen. Yeah. And one of the key issues that I think needed to be discussed or furthered is the non-tax, non-trade barriers. I'm not sure if they're dodging. It's so
difficult. It's a political economy issue. Yeah. And I mean, really, when you even talk about EAC, and EAC is an example for Africa, and even if you look about the African Continental Free Trade Area, even if you have political will, and you know, the real issue is that when you have the level of poverty and the level of desperation, opening up your market in reality can be real tricky. And you can get even domestic private sector getting very anxious about letting all these other people take our market share. So it becomes sensitive.
What they're saying is very important, because recently we saw the government ordering KCC to buy milk from farmers at 33 shillings from 25 shillings. The farmers say it has to be at least 45 shillings if I'm to make anything. So first of all, at 25 it was bad, at 33 it's still bad. They want a 45 shilling raise, and now you're opening up the markets to other people to come in. So how would they survive in that contest?
It's definitely a sticky issue, and these things are not resolved overnight. There are a lot of discussions that need to happen between countries. It's not, a lot of countries, and you see it the world over, America is becoming protectionist, the UK is becoming protectionist. A lot of people are closing their borders, so, you know, but to, for various reasons. One of them is to make sure that their fundamentals, their industries are thriving in a global context. And you see that. That's why it's so hard for the AU to figure out, visas, for example. Nigeria, one of the biggest economies, have not really accepted or agreed to allow people to just cross into their borders, just because of that reason, because they have to make sure that the industries are doing well. And we all understand that. So we need to, these things take a lot of time. The fundamentals have to be right. I 100% agree with the idea about market information. Vincent was talking about, a large percentage of startups that are failing as each year. And that's not unusual. Startups start and many of them fail. But the idea is to continue to resource them to either start again or find other avenues to go into when they're thinking about creating businesses. So I think making sure that the information is available for people to go in, and then thinking about R&D. How do you innovate? How do you take the next step? And that's a big place that government can support, to bring in information to the sector to enable startups to thrive and startups to start again and think about new ways of doing things differently. Okay, I have to take a quick break now. Mwinamo, I'll come back with you and also see your feedback as well. And now we're going to talk about the consumer purchasing power, because is there a disconnect between the businesses that are being started and what people can ordinarily manage to spend? Is that something the SME sector are also considering? So as we're doing this, we're trying to ensure that you get the tips of how to grow your SME if you're thinking of going towards that direction. And that's where it says not everyone is an entrepreneur, so don't do it if you don't want to stick for the long run. So keep your feedback coming on 22422 at Trevor Mbidi at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Daybreak, and also you can call in at some point, 0742961339. I think I have space for one more caller, and then we'll just wrap it up in just a bit. See you shortly.